Hello all and welcome to today's workshop entitled Technology and Higher Education Classroom. My name is Katie Walsh and I want to welcome our two live audience students, Sarah and Matt, and also welcome our virtual audience as well. So before we begin, let's do a couple of just housekeeping things. We want to turn off and tune in. And so what we mean by turn off is, so turn off all distractions, all cell phones, all emails, Facebook, all that sorts of stuff. And we want to tune in. So let's do, so we won't do an audio check just yet, but I want to show you if you are experiencing audio difficulties during the presentation, if you go up to Tools and you click on Tools and Audio, and then you go over to the Audio Setup Wizard, that should help in terms of your sound and your mic. So if you are experiencing difficulties, you can go up and do that. And I also, as the moderator, can see that you are experiencing difficulties, and I might recommend that you do it at that time. But let's check to make sure we have everybody and you all can hear me. So if you can hear me, fine. Would you give me a smiley face? If you go over to your dashboard, there's a drop-down menu, and you will give me a smiley face. Thank you very much. And if you can see the recording button up in the top right-hand corner, and it's red, if you'll give me a green check, please. Thank you, Sarah. Just waiting for Matt. Awesome. All right, so you all can hear me and you can see me. Now, if I could just ask each of you to grab the mic and just give us your name. I want to make sure that I can hear you as well.
Sarah.
Hello, this is Matt.
Thank you very much. And if you all want to keep your microphones off for the duration, that's fine. I'll let you know when to grab them back. All right, and lastly, let's free our minds of all the things that we have to do and just really spend the next 10 to 15 minutes focusing on the subject at hand. So our big question for the day, what are the most effective ways to integrate technology into the higher education classroom? So education and technology, these things go together, and certainly in higher ed, the technology is a sort of big buzzword, but there is a lot of disagreement about how and even whether to integrate technology into the higher ed classroom. So some learning objectives, I have two primarily for us today. First, to identify ways to effectively integrate technology into the college classroom, and then secondly, to develop strategies for accomplishing this goal. So before we get into the subject matter at hand, I just want to think about technology in general and how we use it in our lives. So I think we've adopted it maybe more than we realize. So I have a couple of examples here, and if this statement applies to you, would you give me a green check? I have stopped buying CDs and DVDs because of programs like iTunes, Netflix, or Hulu. All right, 2 green checks. All right, would both of you just go down into the chat box, which is right underneath where you are, and just give us sort of a brief description of why you've done that? I know for myself, for iTunes, when you buy a bunch of CDs, before, you had all these CDs that were just piling up. I also like buying songs individually. Yeah, okay, good, Matt. Yeah, save money. I think that was sort of a thing with me in iTunes as well. And for cable, saving Hulu, money on Hulu and Netflix and that sorts of stuff. Sarah, why does this apply to you? Oh, you never bought DVDs. Yeah, I know. I didn't actually buy DVDs either. I'm not a big movie person. But it is definitely easy. Yeah, easy and saving money. Okay, let's move on to the next one. I pay the majority of my bills online using online bill pay or direct deposit rather than personal checks. So if this applies to you, if you'll give me a check mark. If it doesn't, an X. I think this one applies to me. And I think the main reason probably is because I hate buying the checks and I hate buying the stamps for the checks. All right, so Sarah, will you tell us why it applies to you, and Matt, why it doesn't apply to you? I'm curious.
All right. Well, why it applies to me is I pretty much don't write any checks anymore. In fact, buying checkbooks with my bank, it costs a lot to buy it, so it's just easier to use. If I have to do something, I'd rather just use my card. It's just easier.
Yeah, sure. How about you, Matt? Grab the mic.
Well, I am in the process of transitioning, but I prefer not to use automatic bill pay because I like to look at my statement balances each month, and if I have to write the check, then it forces me to look at the charges.
Good. All right, so different opinions here. I want to sort of keep this in mind, especially as we're thinking about technology in the classroom, because it's not always a sort of everybody's on board. There are definitely some. I know, for instance, myself, sometimes if I forget to pay the bill online, or if I delete the email, and then there's a charge that accrues. So there are some downsides to it as well. And as you said, Matt, you like to sort of see the money going out. So I totally understand that. Last one, when I don't know how to do something, my first instinct is to search Google rather than ask a friend or family member. So check if that applies to you. Oh, I need to clear it out, sorry. Check if that applies to you, X if it doesn't. 2 checks there, I thought I might get that. Yeah, right, this is sort of ingrained in us now. We tend to just go, and not always the best thing, right? Sometimes we get some terrible advice from Google, but this is perhaps quicker than trying to hunt down a friend or a family member. So what I was trying to point out with this exercise is to get us to see that there are plus sides and there are negative sides, or advantages and disadvantages to technology. But a lot of what we said here points to why we ended up adopting that technology. So in the case of the iTunes or the Hulus, there was a money-saving cost. Sarah, you said that you prefer you don't like to write the checks. You just prefer, it's easier to just have it deducted. So there's a sort of incentive for you to adopt this new technology. So when it comes to technology in higher ed, there was a recent survey just last year conducted by Inside Higher Ed that revealed that faculty on the whole are skeptical about the use of technology in the college classroom. Now this includes technology in general as well as online learning. And this study surveyed faculty members as well as technology administrators and compared the results between them. And the faculty that they measured were tenured and non-tenured, full-time, part-time. And so a lot of sort of discrepancies emerged, but one general theme that emerged was that for faculty as well as technology administrators, those who were more familiar with the technology tended to have a more favorable opinion of it. So that really got me thinking about when it comes to faculty and sort of getting them to effectively integrate technology, we need them to have a sort of a positive opinion of that. So how do we begin that process? How do we get them to think in those terms? So the material for my workshop today, a lot of it comes from Inside Higher Ed. I've also used several other sources, which I'll list at the end, but William Garrison's book, E-Learning in the 21st Century, and a couple of other TED Talks on educational technology. And all of these raise really important questions with the use of technology. So I picked 3 here that I think are perhaps 3 very effective ways of integrating technology in the classroom, but they don't come without challenge. So the first way I think that we can effectively integrate technology is that we need to provide faculty with an incentive to adopt technology. So the survey, the Inside Higher Ed survey, found that 1 in 3 faculty had taught an online course. I thought that was a higher number. I'm in higher ed, and that's a higher number than I thought. But of the faculty who had not taught an online course, their reasons were because they were never asked, because they're not interested, or because they don't think that online courses have educational value. And so that's clearly demonstrating a lack of motivation on the part of the faculty. And on the one hand, you can't blame them. When it comes to tenure and promotion, they're usually evaluated if you're at a research institution on books and journal articles, publications, maybe service work, but not for the time it might take to adopt a new technology in your classroom or to develop an online course. So I think if we're going to effectively integrate it, we first have to get faculty on board, and we have to reward those who are able and interested in adopting this new technology. So I want to get your opinions on this, though. What do you think? So if, maybe, Matt, if you'll grab the mic first, and then Sarah, do you think that we should provide an incentive for faculty, or do you think as part of their professional development that this should they should be expected to do it?
I think it's a slippery slope to start introducing these sorts of incentives as a requirement for tenure and promotion.
Because you worry that it could go too far? What do you mean by slippery slope?
It's not clear who would be in charge of determining what counted and what didn't.
Okay, good point. Sarah, I think you might be in K through 12, but what do you, either can you speak from your experience there about, are there incentives to adopt technology, or are these discussions occurring?
Yeah, as far as like incentives go, there's not really too much. I mean, I know people will in lower education are encouraged to use the technologies, especially if the school has spent a lot of money on them. As far as the promotions or tenure or higher salaries, there's not really that much of an encouragement that way, but teachers are strongly encouraged, especially if the school spends like a lot of money on those technologies, to use the technologies, and they do put in a lot of work to get those teachers to be proficient in those technologies.
That's a good point. So if the school or the university is spending a lot of money to adopt the technology, then they're more likely to encourage faculty to use it. That makes complete sense. All right, let's look at another sort of effective way to provide training for faculty. Actually, Sarah, you sort of just touched on this. You said if they bring the new technology to the school, they often are providing the training for it. And that was one aspect that emerged from faculty and technology administrators in the Inside Higher Ed survey. They both agreed that faculty need to have additional training for the use of technology in their classrooms. And I would like to argue that they not only need training for specific technologies, but also pedagogical training for what happens after you adopt these technologies. So, for example, one of the more promising avenues for integrating technology into the classroom is blended learning. And one example of this is flipping the classroom. And so in flipping the classroom, and this is, I'm a history lecturer, so this is something that I could try to adopt in my own courses. Rather than having the students hear the lecture when they come to class, they can watch the lecture, or they could watch videos that would describe the same material as the lecture outside of class. And then when they come into the classroom, we could do more sort of hands-on work with the material rather than just having them sit there and passively take notes. So, personally, I'm fully on board with this idea, but in terms of, what I then do with the 100 students when they come into the lecture, it's a bit of a challenge. And so a lot of faculty, as and this is an unfortunate aspect of training, but most faculty do not receive pedagogical training going through graduate school. They often are sort of in an apprenticeship position where they're teaching assistants, and they learn by watching other faculty. So in the case of history, we watched a lot of lectures, and that's sort of what we as young graduate students were taught to do. So then we need additional training to, once we get into the classroom with these students, figure out what kinds of activities can we do with them to maximize learning? So if we're not lecturing to them, then what can we do in the classroom? So I think that there's, again, specific technologies they need to be training, but also pedagogical training. So one of the points that Garrison makes is that the use of technology needs to be driven by pedagogy, and I completely agree with that point. But I think the sort of pedagogy should come, in addition to so the faculty need additional training in pedagogy as well as the specific technology they may be adopting. But again, I want to get your opinions on this, so maybe we'll start with Sarah this time. What is your impression about either K through 12 or higher ed, whichever one, in terms of asking faculty or teachers to go to additional trainings? How useful or how practical is this way?
Well, I definitely believe that teachers need all their training they can get, whether they're in higher ed or lower ed. It is something that you're always trying to constantly improve yourself and improve your classes. And the only way to do that is by going to get those trainings. So I do think it is necessary for teachers to have those type of trainings.
Great, thank you. Matt, I know you have more experience with higher ed. What is your impression of this idea?
Yes, you're right. I've been away from high school for a long time, and I think about this in the context of higher ed. And I was a graduate student and taught myself, and wished that the university had gone further to teach graduate students how to be more effective in the classroom. So I would endorse this statement and say that both faculty and anybody who's in front of a class in higher ed should receive some form of pedagogical training.
Great, thanks. I know I can, again, speak for the history department when it comes to online courses. If faculty is interested in teaching an online course, there are resources available for them in the Center for Teaching and Learning, but they are sort of expected to seek those out on their own. Pretty much they could otherwise just teach the class without the pedagogical training, and specifically in the online context. But there are, at most universities, centers for teaching and learning where faculty can seek out these opportunities. But again, it is on a sort of voluntary basis. And lastly, another way to effectively integrate technology into the classroom, I think, is to pay attention to, or attention should be given to academic disciplines. So the Khan Academy has really led the way when it comes to blended learning, and I actually use Khan Academy videos in my classroom, and specifically the Protestant Reformation unit. They have some very good videos on the Protestant Reformation. And the way that the Khan Academy works, and even some blended learning models work, is usually to present a lesson of some sort, maybe a maximum of 10 minutes, and then allow students to practice that lesson, whatever the skill that's being taught. But it's challenging, especially for humanities kinds of fields, to be able to do that. So, for example, in history, we're storytellers. We like to tell a lot of stories, and students actually get into that. They like to hear the ins and outs of Napoleon and his love life, and they like that, but that's not really a lesson. And it's often hard as well to figure out how to get students to practice a skill in history. We can test their knowledge, but in terms of the skill, that's a little bit challenging. So that's one, I think that technology is great, but it can't be a sort of one-size-fits-all model. So I think that attention needs to be given to the disciplines themselves in terms of how to best adopt this. So last time, I'll ask you all for some input here from your own discipline. So, Matt, I know you're in psychology. Could you start us off and sort of, would this sort of present practice model work for you, or would you need sort of a different model? If you'll grab the microphone, that'd be, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about your question. I wonder, as compared to courses in the humanities, if there does need to be some specific attention to the issues that we encounter in neuroscience. and the teaching needs to be tailored to that. But there should be some general principles that apply as well.
Good point. Okay. Sarah, how about you?
Well, sorry, excuse me. I think that the idea of like subject features on different subjects, it's kind of hard because as an elementary teacher, I get exposure to all of those different subjects.
Right.
So, I mean, yes, for the higher ed, they have to focus on those specific subjects, but for lower education, I think that it can be either way.
Oh, that's a really good point. You're right. So you and K through 12 are expected to teach all of the courses. So yeah, that's a good distinction I hadn't thought of before. All right, so let's sort of strategize, or if we can, think of some ways to affect. So I've raised three means or three ideas to consider to effectively integrate technology in the classroom. So what I'm going to do is put a whiteboard up here and let you all use your tools. And maybe for each one of the strategies or the effective ways that I presented, if you could develop one practical strategy. So the first strategy was to provide an incentive for faculty. So what's one strategy or one way that we could develop an incentive for faculty to adopt technology? So I'll stop talking at this point and allow Sarah and Matt, if you guys will talk to each other and use your tools. If you look on your toolbar there, the letter A, you can type a text box, and maybe we'll just start with the first one for now. So what's a strategy that higher education could adopt to incentivize the adoption of technology for faculty?
So do you want us to talk to each other and one of us write, or?
Yeah, that's a good plan. Sarah's probably more comfortable with writing on the board, but either way, yeah. But yeah, if you'll talk to each other, I'll sort of step out.
Hello, Sarah. So we're going to use the microphones instead of writing on the board. Is that right?
Okay, I think we're going to do both. We're going to use the microphones and write on the board as well.
Okay,
exactly.
keep a list of the things that we come up with on the board.
Or present what we are going to have the idea. Like we can talk out the idea and then write one sentence on the board.
Okay, perfect. So I was just thinking that the federal government incentivizes this sort of thing by creating grant programs for schools.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So maybe offer see if the school can get a federal grant, maybe, to give to teachers.
Yeah, so that's
idea.
One idea. But do you have any other ideas that are different from that?
Well, I was thinking that maybe we could encourage teachers who have certifications of the online certification. They could receive maybe a bit of a pay increase, or for the research, get be able to get more grad students in to help them do their research or something along those lines. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
It does, and I think that your idea gets to the level of the individual teacher, whereas my idea gets to the level of the school or the administration at the school.
Okay, so do we want to type out both ideas maybe?
Sure.
Sure.
I'll go ahead and do that since I have the text key open.
Okay.
Can you see what I'm typing on the screen, everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Actually, Sarah, do you want to type yours on the screen?
Sure, I can go ahead and do that.
Good.
Nice. Well, and just for the sake of time, I'm going to hold off on asking you to think about the other two, but maybe, especially virtual listeners, at this point, if you wouldn't mind pausing the recording and thinking about strategies for the next two effective use of technology. So that would be additional training for faculty and attention to the disciplines. But with my two live students, we're going to press on. And just time for review. So if you wouldn't mind in the text box, if you'll go down and just say one thing either that you learned from this session or one of the strategies that we talked about. If you can remember any of the three strategies, if you would type that in the text box down in the chat box. I'm sorry. All right. Sarah really likes the strategy of blended learning. Yeah, definitely. Flipping the classroom, sure. I can see that Matt is still typing. Yes, ongoing pedagogical training for teachers, definitely, for sure. Yeah, so you sort of touched on sort of the second point in particular, providing additional pedagogical training, especially perhaps in the field of blended learning. Just to remind you, the other two, incentivizing the adoption of technology for faculty, and then lastly, attention to academic disciplines in the adoption of technology. So that's all that I have. If you're a virtual audience, you're welcome to stop by and ask me any questions or email me with any questions. Sarah and Matt, do you have any questions, or are you pretty much set? If
I'm
you
good.
do, would you just grab the mic? Thanks. Matt is applauding, so I think he's probably set. All right, well, thank you very much to all my listeners, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, Katie. Bye, Sarah.
Bye.